Hi. We'll see. How are you? Doing well? Hey, I know you. How are you? Good to see you. All right, I'm going to try something. Now, my phone has been doing this thing where it likes to shut, it gets hot and shuts off. So if that happens, I'm going to have to jump track, but we're going to see if we can do this. This is called repoed. This is how broke I was the other day. When I awoke, I found my car had been taken away, repossessed, but I didn't know this yet. I called the police non-emergency number to report it stolen and was informed they were already aware I may be calling. I guess the bank does this often because there's a fucking procedure in place. Then I had to wait to call the bank because they didn't open until a couple hours later, and I found the vehicle missing, or rather my wife did, when she meant to leave for work at about 7 a.m., and she was already stressed about the work day ahead when she noticed it was missing. Needless to say, she decided it would be best to take a personal day and spend the next few hours taking trips to the bathroom to retrieve some more TP to wipe the tears off her face. And so the credit union let me know I could certainly retrieve the vehicle if I would simply pay nearly $900, which included the past due balance of $550, as well as the advancement of what will be owed for the subsequent 2 months, plus a $25 fee. I'm guessing that's for the time it took them to call the police. And she gave me the number to the place that did the towing. I called there and discovered they charge additionally $100 for the first day plus $25 for each day following. So now I owed $1,000, but I wasn't exactly angry. I have no problem taking full responsibility for my errors. What can I say? Shit came up and I just couldn't make the payments for a couple of months. I felt ashamed and dumb, but all this turned quickly to indignation when the customer service person at the tow company was explaining the process for retrieving the vehicle. I had asked for how long they would be open the following day, and she said 4 p.m., and she said it very politely. She was kind and sweet, understanding, but that's probably how anybody would have to be if they had to speak to people every day who are likely very angry. And then she let me know I can come in during the open hours and just park it out front to pick up later. And she said, that's what most people do anyway. They come on their lunch hour and make sure it gets paid and relocated. Then once they're off work, they come with their husband or wife to drive it home. At this, I became a little irate because she implied so many people have to do this on their fucking lunch break. Now, I didn't take this frustration out on her directly. I'm not an asshole, but once I hung up the phone, goddamn did I rage. Doesn't help that I listened to a podcast the previous day about how the airline industry was penalized for price fixing sometime in the 80s, I think. These competing companies had effectively colluded to literally steal, at least according to the charges from the DOJ, billions of dollars from American consumers. These CEOs got rich by agreeing to raise prices, and from that they would all benefit. And what did they get? Nothing, not even a slap on the wrist. Sure, the companies had to pay something, but I don't think those individuals who profited got personally punished. They didn't have to give back their salaries or bonuses. In fact, the former CEO of Alaskan Airlines is still doing it, albeit in a new market. Who knows what that is? Housing. He could arguably be blamed for why rent is so goddamn high. He introduced a software in the housing industry that determines what rental rates should be based on nothing, really, just by raising a price and seeing what happens. Will tenants pay or will they leave? And for the first time in American history, the median rental rate exceeds $2,000 per month or $67 per day. And this innovative software they utilized to determine these prices, well, first they bought their biggest competitor in a move authorized by Trump's DOJ. Then they created a monopoly on the market. So now all these competing property management companies are effectively basing rental rates on nothing and raising them anyway, all together, without shame, illegally. And here I am, attempting to scrape $1,000 into a pile so I can get my car, so my wife and I can make it to our shitty jobs tomorrow. Hopefully we won't be late. I've worked in housing for about 15 years, and I try to use what I write to sort of convey some of the experiences I have with individuals and people in very vulnerable situations, neurodivergent, mentally ill, disabled individuals. And so I wrote this to talk about an experience. None of this is factually accurate, let's say, that none of the names are the same, but this I've called American Misery. Mark slept in, mostly. He rolled over around 9 a.m. and popped an old Johnny Cash cassette tape into his vintage Sanyo boombox, which sits on the stand next to his bed. Then he pulled the covers back over his body as the full-throated croon of the man in black echoed through the room. By the time side A was over, the mid-morning sun reluctantly slid through the windows on the east side of the home like a toe dipped into spring waters. Mark is the son of a doctor, but this home doesn't belong to his father. Mark's room is only one of a few in this house. Mark wound up here after a curious episode involving a can of hairspray, a lighter, and a razor blade. It's a long story. He shares this room with the ghost of a man who overdosed on heroin back in 1992. That was the year this group home was opened. In the 30 years between the death of Mr. Jones, this room's first drug-addled resident, and Mark, the current tenant, 8 other men slept here, and 2 women, briefly during a period when the agency wanted to try to integrate services for all sexes, which didn't quite work out because apparently housing mentally ill and developmentally disabled men with the opposite gender can actually be kind of dangerous, especially because staff supervision was more lax during this time. So when a resident, collectively known as Cowboy, was found crying, chest heaving, sobbing aloud about Miss Ruby, his friend, what kicked off was the final straw in the decision to reevaluate current operations. And Miss Ruby left the home to spend the rest of her days just 22 feet away from a nurse's station after a brief stay in the ICU. By the end of the week, Cowboy had already forgotten what he did. He was far too distracted by his new bed and roommate. In the old home, Cowboy was allowed to go outside and smoke, but here there were more restrictions. Here, he couldn't see his parents, and he had no friends. Cowboy wished he could go back to his home again, where they wake you up at 6 a.m. and help you get ready for your daily appointments and feed you breakfast, eggs, and biscuits, the smell of them coming from the kitchen. Mark doesn't notice the scent and just tries to sleep in, but he gets woken up at 7 to take his meds. He lays back down but has trouble falling asleep until a new Johnny Cash song starts playing, which he doesn't recognize. And he's listened to this album hundreds of times. He thinks so hard about how this new song got onto his old tape, his brain was finally able to drift off into sleep, but in his dream, the song still plays. But the voice is different. It sounds louder. And there is no percussion, and his father is singing, and in walks his mother, she's smiling, and that's all Mark remembers when he wakes up at 10:30 and finds he is bleeding. He starts screaming. The staff rushes in, demanding to know what the yelling is all about, but all Mark can do is show them his wounds and his hands, which are clean mostly, but Mark could see blood dripping off his fingertips, pouring from his wrists. Mark has to be transported to the hospital via ambulance, but the paramedics are too scared to take him the entire way and had to call for police intervention, not even a block after pulling out of the home's driveway. After a several-day admittance and a change in medications, Mark is better. And the best part about hallucinated wounds is there aren't any scars, at least none visible on his skin. So Mark is sent back to his room, his food delivered to him for a day or two. The staff usually doesn't do this, requiring residents to come to the dining room for meals, but Mark's doctor thought it might be best to isolate him briefly while he adjusts to the new chemicals in his head. It was only on his second day back in his haunted room when a member of the staff found Mark with a cord wrapped around his neck. His face, once pale, then blue, is now gray. It turns out the overnight shift had several other problems to contend with, like another resident caught smoking in the bathroom. So when Mark awoke shortly after midnight, and an argument could be made, he never fell asleep at all. He found the house too quiet and figured it was a good time to solve all the world's problems. He sawed the cord off his vintage Sanyo boombox, and while Johnny Cash sang, he tied it tight with a knot he learned as a Cub Scout in the 3rd grade. He couldn't breathe, but it felt good to know he'd finally get some sleep. Thank you.